I discovered who my family really was the night I asked them for $5,000. Every single one of them thought I was joking. My brother's laughter still echoed in my ears when the doctor's words hadn't yet stopped spinning in my head. A sharp, careless sound, like I'd just delivered a punchline at Thanksgiving dinner. Nobody found funny. Michael's voice came through the phone, bright with dismissal. "You're fine, Kat. You're always fine. You're the strong one." I stood in my living room in San Diego, staring at the triangle-folded American flag mounted in its glass case on the wall, the one they'd given me after my second deployment to Afghanistan. Something cracked inside me right then. Not loudly, quietly, the kind of break you don't hear until it's already too late to fix. That was the moment I decided to test them. Not out of spite, not out of anger, out of clarity. The doctors hadn't said I would die tomorrow. They were careful with their words. Doctors always are. But they did say the phrase that changes everything: running out of time. I'd gone in for what I thought was a routine follow-up at the Naval Medical Center. 39 years old, a Navy officer with nearly 2 decades of service, and I still believed discipline could outrun biology. I sat upright in that white exam room, hands folded neatly in my lap while Dr. Irene Chen explained test results in a calm, rehearsed tone. She talked about options, about probabilities, about preparing. "In your line of work," she added gently, "you understand contingency planning." I nodded. Of course I did. I drove home afterward instead of going back to base. I needed quiet, the kind of quiet you only get inside your own house, the one you worked for, paid for, and never talked about much. The house wasn't fancy. A modest 3-bedroom in a neighborhood near the coast, bought years earlier with a VA loan when I was still young enough to believe life followed clean timelines. I'd paid it down steadily, quietly, no drama, no debt hanging over me. It was the only thing I truly owned. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold and opened my laptop. I didn't write a will yet. I created a spreadsheet. Column A, name. Column B, relationship. Column C, predicted response. Column D, actual response. Column E, decision. I typed the names slowly. James Harper, Margaret Harper, Michael Harper, Rachel Harper. I stared at that list for a long time. In the military, we're taught to prepare for the worst without expecting it. Write things down, make plans, not because you're pessimistic, but because you're responsible. Still, something inside me hesitated. I didn't want to leave behind confusion or resentment or regrets. I wanted to know, before I made anything official, who would actually show up. So I decided to ask for help. Not a handout, not an inheritance discussion, just help. $5,000. I didn't need the money. I had nearly $2 million in assets nobody knew about. The house, an investment portfolio built from careful deployments and frugal living, a rental property in Oceanside. But I needed to know who would say yes without asking why. Who would ask if I was scared? Who would come? I called my parents first. They answered on the second ring, their voices instantly alert when they heard mine. They always sounded proud when they spoke about my career. They liked telling people their daughter was a high-ranking Navy officer. It made good dinner conversation. I didn't mention the diagnosis right away. I told them I might be facing some medical expenses, that things were uncertain. "I need $5,000, I said calmly, keeping my voice level the way I'd learned to do in briefings. There was a pause. Papers rustled on their end. My mother sighed. "Well," my father said slowly, "we'd have to look at our retirement accounts. You know how fixed incomes are." My mother jumped in. "Have you checked your TRICARE coverage? They should handle most of it, and you could always look into a personal loan. Interest rates are pretty low right now." They suggested budgeting tips, insurance questions, maybe a loan, maybe later. They never asked how sick I was. They never asked if I was scared. They never asked what I needed the money for. Not really. Just logistics. Just numbers. I thanked them and hung up. The kitchen felt colder somehow. Next was Michael. He picked up while driving. I could hear music in the background, loud and careless. When I told him I needed $5,000, he laughed. "Is this some kind of test? Because you always land on your feet, Kat. You're the most put-together person I know." I waited for him to say more. He didn't. The music kept playing. His voice shifted to something defensive when I stayed quiet. "Look, I've got Lily's orthodontist bills coming up, $4,500. And work's been slow this month. You know how construction is. I'm not saying no, but you're always the responsible one. You've got to have savings. You can't actually need me. After we hung up, I sat very still and felt something settle in my chest, heavy, permanent. Then my phone rang again. It was Rachel. She didn't interrupt me. She never did. She listened all the way through quietly, like she always had when we were kids and our parents were too busy or too tired. I don't have that kind of money, she said finally when I finished explaining. I told her I understood. My throat felt tight. I have $1,500, she continued, her voice soft but certain. It's not much, but I can drive down tonight. It's about 6 hours from Seattle. I can be there by morning. I closed my eyes. She didn't ask why. She didn't ask what I needed it for. She didn't ask if I was exaggerating or if I'd checked with the bank first or if I'd budgeted properly. She just said she was coming. She arrived the next morning in her old sedan, bags under her eyes, hair pulled back in a tired knot. She brought groceries. She didn't mention the money again. She cleaned my kitchen without asking, made soup, sat with me through long stretches of silence like it was nothing at all. That night, she slept on my couch. I lay awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing from the other room. That was when I knew she had no idea what I was about to do. The next morning, after Rachel left for a few hours to run errands, I sat alone at my kitchen table and stared at my phone. It felt strange what I was about to do, calculated, almost cold. But the truth was, I wasn't trying to trap anyone. I wasn't setting a clever snare or plotting revenge. I was looking for clarity, the kind that doesn't come from words or promises, but from what people do when there's nothing in it for them. In the Navy, we learned quickly that intentions don't matter much. Actions do. When things go wrong, nobody cares what you meant to do. They care about who showed up. I picked up my phone again and scrolled through my call history. The conversations from the night before replayed in my mind. My parents' careful excuses, Michael's laughter, Rachel's quiet certainty. I realized something unsettling. None of them had asked me how bad it really was. Not my parents, not Michael. Only Rachel had asked if I was scared, and even that had come softly, like she was afraid of the answer. That was when I knew I needed to be very clear enough that no one could later say they misunderstood. So I decided to call them again, not to ask for more, just to see what changed when the truth got closer. I started with my parents. My mother answered first, sounding cheerful, as if last night's conversation had already been filed away as something inconvenient but resolved. I've been thinking, I said, keeping my voice steady. The doctors aren't sure how much time I have. That got her attention. There was a sharp inhale. My father's voice joined the line a moment later, his tone shifting from casual to cautious. What did the doctors say? What's the prognosis exactly? Have you considered second opinions? I told them the truth without drama, that nothing was certain, that things could go either way, that I was putting my affairs in order just in case. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just stated facts. My father cleared his throat. You've always been strong, Catherine. You've handled worse than this. My mother added, and you're single. You don't have dependents. That helps, doesn't it? You can focus on yourself. I waited. There it was, the space where concern should have lived, filled instead with logic and practicality and distance. I told them again that I might need help. Not later. Not hypothetically. Soon. My mother said she would pray on it. My father said we'd talk again after the weekend. Neither of them offered the money. Neither of them offered to come. When the call ended, I didn't feel angry. I felt something quieter, like a door closing gently but firmly. I called Michael next. This time he didn't laugh right away. So this is serious? His tone was suddenly cautious, wary. Yes, I said. There was a pause. I imagined him weighing his options, calculating what this meant for him. Well, he said finally, you've always been the responsible one. I figured you'd have everything covered. You don't really need me, right? I asked him directly if he could help. He sighed. I've got a lot going on right now, Kat. The orthodontist thing, and I was planning a trip with Lily. I don't want to cancel. You understand, don't you? I did. I understood perfectly. I hung up and set my phone face down on the table. For a long time, I just sat there. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a lawnmower somewhere down the block. Ordinary life going on, completely unaware that mine had shifted. That afternoon, Rachel came back with groceries and a stack of old photo albums she'd found in my closet. "I thought we could go through these," she said, smiling softly. We sat on the floor and flipped through pictures from decades ago. Holidays, birthdays, the three of us as kids lined up in front of the same house we'd grown up in Oregon. I watched her carefully. She didn't ask about my parents. She didn't ask about Michael. She didn't ask if I'd changed my mind about anything. She just stayed. That evening after dinner, I finally told her everything. About the calls, about the responses, about how alone I'd felt after hanging up the phone each time. Each time. She listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap. "I'm sorry," she said when I finished. "I wish I could do more." "You already are," I told her. She shook her head. "I just wish they'd been there for you." So did I. Later that night, after she went to bed, I took out the spreadsheet again. This time, I didn't just write names. I wrote notes beside them. Who called back, who didn't, who showed up, who stayed away. I thought about fairness, about what people expect when someone talks about a will. In my family, fairness had always meant splitting things evenly, regardless of effort or behavior. But as I sat there in the dim kitchen light, I realized something I'd learned long ago in uniform and somehow forgotten at home. Fair doesn't mean equal. Fair means earned. The next day, I called a JAG officer I trusted, someone I'd worked with years earlier. Lieutenant Commander William Sanders. I told him I needed to start preparing documents. Nothing dramatic, just responsible planning. He didn't ask why. He didn't pry. He simply scheduled a time to meet. When I hung up, I felt an unexpected sense of calm. Not relief, just clarity. The test was already over. I didn't tell Rachel what I was planning. I didn't tell anyone. I wanted the decision to stand on its own, untouched by gratitude or guilt. That night, as I lay in bed, I listened again to the familiar sounds of the house, the creak of the floorboards, the steady ticking of the clock in the hallway. I thought about how easily people talk about love, about family, about being there for one another, and I thought about how rare it is to see it proven. The doctors had said I was running out of time, but what they hadn't said, what they couldn't have known, was that time had just given me something invaluable, the truth. Rachel never announced what she was doing. She just did it. The morning after my call with the JAG officer, I woke up to the sound of dishes clinking softly in the kitchen. For a split second, I forgot she was there. Then the smell of coffee drifted down the hallway, and I remembered. She was standing at the counter in an old sweatshirt, hair pulled back, moving carefully so she wouldn't wake me. When she noticed me in the doorway, she smiled like she'd been there all along, which in a way she always had been. "Morning," she said. "I hope you like oatmeal." It was that or eggs, and I didn't want to risk burning anything. I laughed, a real laugh, the kind that surprised me with how rusty it sounded. Over breakfast, she talked about nothing important, traffic on the drive down, a neighbor's dog that wouldn't stop barking, the grocery store being out of her favorite bread. She never mentioned my parents, never mentioned Michael, and still, I felt like she understood exactly what had happened. After we ate, she cleared the table and started wiping down the counters. I told her she didn't have to do that. She waved me off. "You always say that," she said, "and you always let me do it anyway." She was right. For the next few days, she settled into the house like it was second nature. She made soup from scratch, did laundry without being asked, sat beside me during long stretches of quiet when my energy dipped and conversation felt like too much effort. She didn't hover. She didn't ask for updates every hour. She seemed to know when to talk and when to stay silent, like she was reading a rhythm I didn't even realize I was putting out. One afternoon, she drove me to a follow-up appointment at Walter Reed Naval Medical Center. I insisted I could go alone. She didn't argue. She just picked up her keys and stood by the door, waiting. The waiting room was crowded and loud. People flipping through magazines they weren't reading. Phones ringing. Someone coughing too loudly. I felt exposed there, stripped of my uniform, my rank, my sense of control. Rachel sat beside me, hands folded in her lap. When the nurse called my name, she looked up and met my eyes. "I'll be right here," she said. After the appointment, she didn't ask what the doctor had said. She waited until I brought it up myself, hours later, over dinner. That night, she slept on the couch again. I offered her my bed. She refused. "I'm fine," she said. "This couch has seen worse." In the dark, I thought about how different this felt from the calls with my parents and Michael. They had asked questions, offered opinions, given advice. Rachel had offered presence. There's a difference you don't fully understand until you need it. On the fourth day, she handed me an envelope. "I brought this," she said almost apologetically. "I know it's not much." Inside was a cashier's check for $1,500. "You don't have to," I started. "I know," she said gently, "but I want to." I held the envelope longer than necessary. That money represented something different for her than it did for anyone else in my family. It wasn't spare. It wasn't extra. It was a sacrifice. 2 years of saving, gone in an instant because I'd asked. I felt a tightness in my throat I hadn't felt since the doctor's office. Later that evening, while she showered, I walked through the house alone. I paused in the doorway of the guest room, the study, the small backyard where I'd planted a lemon tree years ago and watched it grow taller than the fence. This house had been my anchor, my place to land between deployments, the one thing that stayed steady while everything else shifted. And suddenly I saw it differently. I saw Rachel standing at the sink, humming quietly as she washed dishes, sitting on the couch late at night with a blanket pulled tight around her shoulders, driving 6 hours without hesitation because I'd asked for help. She had no idea what this place meant to me. She had no idea what it was worth. The next morning, my parents called. They'd talked, they said. They were concerned now, very concerned. My mother asked if I needed help with meals. My father suggested we look into long-term planning. They asked if Rachel was still there. "Yes," I said. "Well," my mother replied carefully, "it's good you have someone." It wasn't gratitude I heard in her voice. It was relief, the kind that comes when responsibility shifts quietly onto someone else. After I hung up, I went outside and sat on the back steps. Rachel joined me a few minutes later, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said, and for the first time since this had all begun, I meant it. That afternoon, I made a decision I didn't tell her about. I opened my laptop and reviewed the notes I'd made with the JAG officer during our initial call. I read through the language slowly, carefully, like I'd been trained to do. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt resolved. That evening, as we sat watching an old movie neither of us was really paying attention to, Rachel leaned her head back against the couch and sighed. "I'm glad I came," she said. I almost didn't. I was worried I'd be in the way. I looked at her, really looked at her, the lines around her eyes, the tiredness she tried to hide, the steadiness underneath it all. "You were never in the way," I said. She smiled, small and uncertain, and turned back to the screen. She had no idea the house was already hers. Thursday morning, I drove to the naval base alone. Rachel offered to come, but I told her I needed to do this part myself. She nodded, understanding without needing explanation. Lieutenant Commander William Sanders' office smelled like old coffee and legal paper. He stood when I entered, shaking my hand with the firm grip of someone who'd spent 20 years in service. "Kat," he said, "long time." "Coffee?" "No, thanks. I need to get straight to it." He opened his laptop. "All right. Will and medical directives. Simple or complex?" "Very simple, but very clear." We went through the basics first. Power of attorney, DNR orders, who would make decisions if I couldn't. Then we came to assets. Will pulled up a document template. "Who do you want the house to go to?" I didn't hesitate. "My sister, Rachel Harper." He nodded, typed a note, and moved on without comment. In his world, decisions were respected when they were made deliberately. That mattered to me. We discussed the investment portfolio, the rental property, the retirement accounts. I told him exactly how I wanted things divided. 90% to Rachel, small amounts to my parents and Michael, enough to be acknowledged, not enough to be rewarded. "This is fairly disproportionate," Will observed carefully. "Not disproportionate, fair." I showed him the spreadsheet on my phone. The test, the responses, the scores. He read it slowly, then looked up at me with something close to understanding in his eyes. "This could be contested," he said. "Family might challenge it. Let them try. I have the right to decide what happens to my own assets." "You do, and with a military will, it's very hard to overturn if you're of sound mind," which I am, which you are. We finalized the language. Everything precise, legally airtight, impossible to misinterpret. When we finished, Will printed the documents and slid them across the desk. "You'll need witnesses for the signature," he said. "I can arrange that now if you'd like." I picked up the pen. "Let's do it." 2 enlisted personnel came in. Neither of them knew me personally, which was important. No conflict of interest. They watched as I signed Catherine M. Harper, LCDR USN. The date, November 14th, 2024. "Thanks, Will," I said as I stood. "Kat," he said quietly, "I hope you'll be okay." "Me too, but at least now I know everything's clear." I drove home feeling lighter, not happy, not sad, just certain. When I got back, Rachel was folding laundry in the living room. She looked up and smiled. "How'd it go?" "Fine, man," I said, "just paperwork." She went back to folding. I stood in the doorway watching her for a moment, this woman who'd given everything without asking for anything in return, who'd driven through the night, who'd slept on my couch for a week, who'd handed me her life savings in an envelope with an apology for it not being more. The house, the portfolio, the future, it was all hers now, on paper, legal, permanent. And she had no idea. That night, I made Rachel's favorite dinner: chicken parmesan, garlic bread, a simple salad. We ate at the kitchen table like we had 100 times growing up, talking about small things, laughing at old memories. She told me a story I had forgotten, about waiting for me after school when we were kids because our parents were late, about how she always felt better when I showed up, even if I didn't say much. "You were steady," she said. "You always were." I looked at her across the table and realized how rarely anyone had described me that way. Steady, strong, yes, competent, sure, but steady. That felt different. That felt like being seen. She had no idea that steadiness was about to change her life. The weekend passed quietly. Rachel didn't leave. She didn't talk about going back to Seattle. She just stayed, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sunday evening, my mother called again. "Catherine," she said, her voice tight with something I couldn't quite name. "We've been talking. We're worried about you making big decisions right now. You're under a lot of stress." "I'm not stressed, Mom. I'm clear. But making a will at your age, it seems premature, unless there's something you're not telling us. I've told you everything you needed to know." There was a pause. Have you made any decisions about your estate?" "I have. And it's handled." Another pause, longer this time. "We just want what's fair, Catherine." "I know exactly what fair means, Mom. Don't worry." After I hung up, Rachel knocked softly on my door. She'd heard my voice through the wall, heard the tension. "You've been on the phone a lot," she said quietly. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I told her. It was. She handed me a mug of tea and glanced around my bedroom. "You've always taken good care of this place," she said. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "I know it sounds silly," she added, "but houses remember things. Who lived in them? Who was kind in them?" I swallowed hard. That night I dreamed about the day I moved in, about standing in the empty living room, keys cold in my hand, wondering who would ever sit on the couch with me. I woke up knowing something important had shifted. Monday morning, I finalized everything with Will. Not the final version, that would come after a 30-day waiting period, but enough to make my intent real, enough that if something happened tomorrow, Rachel would be taken care of. I folded the papers carefully and placed them in a folder in my desk drawer. I didn't feel relief. I felt alignment, like something finally matched the truth I'd been carrying quietly for years. At dinner that night, Rachel told me another story from childhood I'd half forgotten, about how I used to walk her to the bus stop every morning in middle school after she got bullied, how I never made a big deal of it, just showed up. "You didn't fix it," she said. "You just made it less lonely." I looked at her across the table and realized I'd been wrong about something. I thought I was the strong one, the responsible one, the one who took care of everyone else. But Rachel had been taking care of me all along, quietly, without recognition, without reward. She deserved the house. She deserved everything. And soon she would have it. The truth has a way of surfacing in families, even when you're careful. It didn't come out because I announced it. I didn't sit everyone down with a dramatic speech. I didn't wave papers in the air. I didn't want a scene. I wanted peace. But my mother had always been good at sensing when something was happening without her permission. It started with a voicemail. I was in the shower when my phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. When I came out, towel around my shoulders, I saw my mother's name on the screen, 3 missed calls, then a message. Her voice was tight, too controlled, Call me back now, Catherine. We need to talk. Rachel was in the kitchen stirring soup when I walked out, phone in hand. She glanced up at my face and immediately softened. Bad call? She asked. Not yet, I said, so I did, and not that. I waited until after lunch to call her back, not to punish her, to steady myself. She picked up on the first ring. Is it true? She demanded. No greeting, no small talk. Are you leaving your house to Rachel? My grip tightened around the phone. It's my house, Mom. Yes, that's my plan. There was a sharp sound on the line, like she'd put her hand over the receiver to speak to someone in the room. Then my father's voice came on, calmer but carrying the same weight. We just want to understand, Catherine. Can you explain yourself? I sat down at the kitchen table. Rachel's back was turned, but her shoulders were tense, even though she wasn't part of the conversation. It isn't complicated, I said. I asked for help. You said no. She came. My mother's voice rose. That's not fair. We didn't say no. We said we had to think about it. I let the silence stretch. My father cleared his throat. We're your parents, Catherine. We've done a lot for you. You can't just... You raised me, I interrupted, and I'm grateful. But what I asked for wasn't impossible. It was $5,000. And I didn't even need it for the money. I needed to know who would show up. That was when Michael's voice cut in. He must have been there with them. Of course he was. You tested us? He scoffed. Are you kidding? That's so dramatic, Kat. I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple. I asked. You laughed. I didn't think you were serious. His voice turned defensive, almost angry. You're always fine. You're always the hero. You're always the one who has it all together. How was I supposed to know you actually needed help? There was something almost resentful in his tone, and for the first time I heard it clearly. My strength had never inspired him. It had irritated him, like my responsibility made him feel smaller. My mother stepped back in, voice shaking now. Your sister needs help too, Catherine, but this is your family home. You can't just hand it over because you're upset with us. Family home? I looked around my kitchen, at the clean counters Rachel had wiped down, at the quiet stability I'd built alone. It's not the family home, Mom. It's my home. I bought it. I paid for it. I maintained it. I came back to it after deployments when I was exhausted, when I was scared, when I didn't know if I'd ever feel normal again. My father's voice softened slightly, a tactic I recognized. We didn't know you felt like that, Catherine. You didn't, The line went quiet. In the kitchen, Rachel turned around slowly, soup ladle frozen in her hand. She was listening now. Her eyes were wide. I hadn't planned for her to hear this part, but maybe it was time. I don't want to fight, I said into the phone, but I'm not changing my decision because it makes you uncomfortable. My mother exhaled sharply. So you're punishing us? No, I'm making a choice. Michael muttered something under his breath, something crude, something bitter. My father told him to stop. My mother's voice cracked. Is Rachel manipulating you? Is she... I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. Rachel flinched. No, I said, louder than I meant to. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't know. She just came. I turned and looked at Rachel. Her face had gone pale. She set the ladle down with trembling hands. I didn't, she started to say. I know. Ew. I told her softly. You didn't. On the phone, my father said my name. Careful. Warning, like he used to when I was a teenager and he thought I was about to embarrass the family. Let's meet, he said, in person. We'll talk this out like adults. Part of me wanted to say no. Part of me wanted to hang up and lock the door and never deal with any of them again. But I wasn't trying to sever ties, not completely. I'll meet, I said, but I'm not negotiating my will. I'll explain it, that's all. My mother's voice came through one more time, quieter now, but still sharp. You're really doing this? Yes. After I hung up, Rachel sank into a chair like her legs had given out. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to cause... You didn't cause anything, I said firmly. I sat across from her and took her hands. This was already there. I just finally looked at it. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't want your house, Kat. I want you. That hit me harder than anything my parents or Michael had said. For a long time, we just sat there, hands clasped, the soup simmering forgotten on the stove. Outside, The neighborhood carried on like nothing had happened. Mail trucks, kids riding bikes, somebody's radio playing faintly down the street, ordinary life. Inside my house, the truth had finally been spoken out loud, and I knew the next meeting, face to face, would change everything. We met a week later at a diner halfway between my house and my parents' place in Oregon. Neutral ground, my father's idea. Giuseppe's Family Diner in San Luis Obispo, the kind of place that hadn't changed in decades. Vinyl booths the color of dried blood, formica tables worn smooth by 40 years of elbows, laminated menus sticky with syrup and thyme. Coffee that tasted the same no matter who poured it. I'd eaten in places like this all over the country, places where people talked about ordinary things because it felt safer than talking about what really mattered. Rachel offered to stay home the night before we left. "I don't want to make this worse," she said, folding clothes in my guest room with mechanical precision. "You're not the problem, and you're not a secret." She came anyway, sitting beside me in the passenger seat as we drove north on the 101. The ocean appeared and disappeared through gaps in the coastal hills, gray and restless under November clouds. Neither of us spoke much. There wasn't much left to say that hadn't already been said. My parents were already seated when we arrived at 11:17. Margaret wore a floral dress and makeup carefully applied to hide swollen eyes. James wore a polo shirt and khakis, still trying to maintain some appearance of control, of normalcy. They looked older than I remembered. Smaller somehow. Michael arrived 6 minutes later, alone. Lily was staying with a friend, he'd texted earlier. Probably better that way. He wore a flannel shirt and jeans, his beard grown out in patches. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. No one hugged, no one smiled. We exchanged nods that felt like negotiations. Nancy, the waitress, appeared with her order pad. She was 50s, sharp-eyed, the kind of woman who'd seen enough family drama to recognize it instantly. "Everyone ready to order?" I ordered coffee and scrambled eggs. Rachel asked for blueberry pancakes and orange juice. Margaret requested only tea and a single slice of toast. James got eggs over easy and bacon. Michael waved her off. Just coffee. Nancy looked at us, really looked, and something like sympathy crossed her face. She nodded and disappeared into the kitchen noise. 5 minutes of silence followed. Only the distant clatter of dishes, the low murmur of other conversations, a country song playing softly from speakers older than I was. James finally folded his hands on the table, assuming the posture of someone chairing a meeting. "Catherine, we don't want this family torn apart." I sipped my coffee, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue before swallowing. "Neither do I." Margaret leaned forward, voice pitched just above a whisper. "Then why are you doing this?" "Which part, making a will or choosing Rachel?" "Both." I pulled out my laptop, opened it, turned the screen so they could see. This is why. The spreadsheet appeared in neat columns. Names, responses, scores, decisions, everything documented with the precision I'd learned in logistics planning, everything quantified. James read it, his face shifting from neutral to flushed. "You scored us? Like some kind of performance review?" "Not scored, documented." Margaret's hand trembled as she reached for her tea. "You called asking for money just to test us? That's manipulation, Catherine." I set my cup down carefully, meeting her eyes across the chipped formica. "No, Mom, that wasn't manipulation. That was a minimum requirement. I didn't ask you for $100,000. I asked for $5,000. And I didn't ask for a gift. I said I needed to borrow it. I wasn't asking you to quit your jobs or abandon your lives to take care of me. I was asking for a small amount of support." The only test was this: who would be beside me when I was at my weakest? Michael's voice cut through, sharp with defensiveness. "So I failed. I get it. I'm sorry, okay? But you can't destroy the whole family over one mistake." I turned to him slowly, pulling up another document on my phone. "Not one mistake, Michael. Here's the list." I read it aloud. Each item a small stone dropped into still water. 2015. I came home on leave after Afghanistan with PTSD. You told me I was being too sensitive. You never asked how I was doing. 2017. I got in a car accident, broke my wrist. You said at least you're not dead. You never came to visit. 2019. My engagement fell apart. You said I focused too much on my career, that men don't like that. You never offered comfort. 2022, I got promoted to lieutenant commander. You said I got lucky. You never congratulated me. 2024, I asked to borrow $5,000 because my health was failing. You laughed. Michael's face went pale. His mouth opened, then closed. 5 times, not 1. Margaret started crying then, not the manipulative tears I'd seen before, but something rawer. We didn't know, she said, her voice breaking. We thought you were strong. We thought you didn't need us. Rachel spoke for the first time since we'd sat down. Her voice was quiet but clear, cutting through the thickness in the air. But Kat always asked everyone else. She asked me, she asked you, she asked Michael, "Are you okay?" Nobody ever asked her back, because everyone assumed strong meant she didn't need. She looked directly at my mother. Did you know Kat cried for 3 nights after John broke up with her? I know because she called me. She didn't call you. She knew you'd tell her to focus on work instead. James stared at Rachel like he was seeing her for the first time, seeing her as something other than the quiet one who never made waves. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. This is a copy of my will. Notarized. Legal. I slid it across the table. They opened it with shaking hands. I watched their eyes move down the page, watched understanding settle into shock. Margaret's breath caught. $34,000 for your parents? Enough to cover funeral expenses and buy something small. The same proportion of support you offered me. James's face flushed dark red. You have almost $2 million and you never said anything? You never asked. Michael leaned back in the booth, something crumbling in his expression. All those years. You let us think you were just getting by on military pay. I never lied. You just never wondered. Margaret's voice rose, drawing looks from nearby tables. This is about Rachel giving you money, isn't it? You're buying her love? I felt heat flash up my spine but kept my voice level. No, Mom. Rachel didn't give me money. Rachel gave me presents. She drove 6 hours in the middle of the night. She slept on my couch for a week. She asked if I was scared. You never asked that question. Not once. My father tried again, his tone shifting to something he probably thought was reasonable. If we help now, would that change anything? I shook my head. No. Margaret's voice turned brittle. So that's it? You've made up your mind? I didn't make it up. I recognized what was already true. I turned to face all of them, needing them to understand. Listen carefully. I'm not doing this because I'm angry. I'm doing it because it's fair. Fair doesn't mean equal. Fair means earned. Rachel earned this because she showed up when I needed her. She gave without asking for anything back. She loved without conditions. You loved me when I was strong, when I succeeded, when I didn't need you. I don't blame you for that, but I also don't reward absence. The silence that followed felt different, heavier. Margaret covered her face with her hands. James stared at his coffee like it held answers. Michael looked at the ceiling, jaw working. Nancy appeared with food we'd ordered what felt like hours ago. She set plates down with practiced efficiency, refilled coffee cups, and left without a word. No one touched their food. Finally, James spoke. We made mistakes. He sounded like each word cost him something. We thought loving you meant giving you freedom, letting you be independent. We didn't know you also needed permission to be weak. Margaret nodded, wiping her eyes with a paper napkin. We raised you to be strong, but we forgot to teach you that needing help isn't weakness, that asking for support is okay. I looked at them both. You taught me strength, but you forgot to teach me that being vulnerable is okay too, that asking for help doesn't make me less. Rachel learned that because nobody expected her to be strong all the time, so she was free to just love. I turned to Michael, and you've been jealous of me because you thought I had everything, but do you know what I actually had? Loneliness. 39 years of hiding my feelings. Success, yes, but nobody to hold my hand when I was afraid. You want to trade places? He shook his head, tears spilling over. No, he whispered. Kat, I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not because of the money, because I wasn't there for you. I won't ask for another chance because I know it's too late. But I'll do better, not for the will, because you're my sister. You know the money I set aside for Lily in the will? $144,000? That's for her college, so she never has to depend on you, so she can choose her own path. That's my gift to her, because I love her, even if I don't love the way you treated me. Michael broke then, shoulders shaking, this 42-year-old man crying like a child in a diner booth while strangers pretended not to notice. Margaret finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. What do we do now? How do we fix this? You can't fix the past, but you can build a future. If you want to be in my life, show up. Not when I'm strong, when I'm weak. Ask me if I'm scared. Ask me if I'm sad. Ask me what you can do, that's all. Rachel had been silent for most of the meal, but now she spoke again. And if you want to hate me for this, I understand. But I need to be clear. I didn't ask for Kat's house. I didn't know about it until last week. I came because I love her, not for money. If the family wants to blame someone, blame yourselves for not coming when she needed you. And if Kat lives another 50 years, I'll still show up. I'll still sleep on her couch. I'll still make soup because that's what family means, not money. Presence. Everyone fell quiet. Nancy walked by again, caught my eye, and gave the smallest nod of solidarity, one woman to another, acknowledging something that didn't need words. We left the diner without resolution, but with something else. Understanding, maybe, or at least acknowledgement that the old pattern had broken and we'd have to build something new. In the parking lot, Margaret hugged Rachel for the first time in years. Brief, awkward, but genuine. "I'm sorry we didn't see you," she said. "I'm sorry we didn't see what you were doing." Rachel nodded, accepting without needing more. On the drive home, Rachel stared out at the ocean for miles before speaking. "Do you think they'll change?" "Some of them might." Michael sounded like he meant it. "And your parents? They're trying? That's more than I expected." Back in San Diego, I received a text from James. Just 2 lines. "We're sorry. We'll do better." Then one from Michael. "Thank you for Lily's fund. I don't deserve your kindness." I didn't reply right away. I wanted to see if the words would turn into actions. That night, I finalized the actual will, not the preliminary version, but the binding document. I signed it in my home office with Rachel reading in the living room, completely unaware that her name was now permanently attached to everything I owned. When I closed the folder and slid it into my desk drawer, I felt something settle that had been restless for months. Not relief exactly, alignment, like a bone set properly after being broken. I walked out to find Rachel curled up on the couch with a book, a blanket pulled around her shoulders. She looked up when I entered. "All done?" "All done." She smiled and went back to reading. Outside, the neighborhood hummed with ordinary evening sounds. Inside, everything had shifted in ways she wouldn't understand for a long time. 3 weeks passed. My parents called twice more. Short conversations, careful, asking questions they'd never asked before. "How are you feeling today? Did you sleep well? Do you need anything?" Small things, but real. Michael called every Sunday. He talked about Lily, about work, about trying to be better. He never mentioned money. He asked if I needed him to come down. I said not yet, but maybe soon. When I said that, his voice broke. "Thank you, Kat. Just thank you." Rachel came down from Seattle every other weekend. She'd given notice at her apartment, she mentioned casually one Saturday morning while making pancakes. "My lease is up in February. I was thinking maybe I could find a place down here. Be closer." I looked at her carefully. "You could stay here?" "Kat, I can't just move into your house." "Why not? There's a whole guest room doing nothing." She turned from the stove, spatula in hand, searching my face for something. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." But she didn't know the guest room would be hers legally soon anyway. Didn't know the whole house would be hers if anything happened to me. Didn't know I'd already made that decision weeks ago. December arrived with unexpected warmth. My health stabilized, not cured, but manageable. The amyloidosis responded better to treatment than Dr. Chen had predicted. "Maybe your body knows you have things to settle," she said during a follow-up. "Maybe it's giving you time." Or maybe it was knowing the truth, knowing who mattered, knowing I'd made the right choice. Christmas approached, and for the first time in a decade, everyone wanted to gather. Margaret called to ask if they could come to San Diego, if we could do it right this year. I said yes. Rachel started planning immediately. Menu, decorations, sleeping arrangements. The house filled with the smell of pine and cinnamon, with the sound of someone else's happiness echoing through rooms that had been too quiet for too long. Michael and Lily arrived first. Lily had grown since I'd last seen her, 12 now, all legs and braces and uncertainty. She hugged me carefully. Dad said you've been sick. Are you better? I'm managing. Good. Because I made you something. She handed me a card, handmade, with a drawing of a lighthouse. You're like this, she said, standing strong even when the water gets rough. I had to look away to keep from crying. My parents arrived Christmas Eve. James carried groceries he'd insisted on bringing. Margaret had baked her famous apple pie, the one she only made for special occasions. They looked nervous, like guests in a home they weren't sure they belonged in anymore. Rachel greeted them with warmth I wasn't certain they'd earned yet, but she was kinder than me in that way, always had been. We cooked together that evening, all of us in my kitchen, somehow making it work despite the crowding. Rachel's soup, Margaret's stuffing, Michael's attempt at cookies that came out burned but edible. James tending the small fire I'd built in the fireplace, even though San Diego winter barely required it. Lily set the table with care, asking where everything should go like it mattered deeply that she get it right. At dinner, we sat around the table I'd bought at a thrift store years ago, the one I'd eaten alone at more times than I could count. Now it was full, crowded, loud with conversation and laughter that felt fragile but real. Margaret raised her glass of wine. To family, she said, to second chances. We drank to that. Later, after Lily went to bed in the guest room and Michael dozed on the couch, and my parents retired to the converted office with an air mattress, Rachel and I sat on the back porch. The lemon tree rustled in the breeze. Somewhere down the street, someone was playing music, something soft and jazzy that barely reached us. This is nice, Rachel said, having everyone here. It is. She looked at me sideways. You're not going to tell me what's in the will, are you? No. She smiled. That's okay. I don't need to know. But she would. Eventually. When the time came, whether that was 6 months or 50 years, she'd know. She'd understand why I'd made the choice I did, and I hoped she'd accept it without guilt, without burden, knowing she'd earned every single bit of it. The next morning, Christmas Day, we opened presents by the tree Rachel had insisted we get. Small things, mostly. But Lily gave me a framed photo she'd printed herself. The two of us from years ago, when she was maybe 6, at some family barbecue I'd barely remembered attending. You looked happy, she explained. I wanted you to remember being happy. I hugged her for a long time. Michael gave me a card with a handwritten letter inside. 2 pages of apology, of acknowledgement, of promises to do better. I won't let you down again, he'd written. I know I don't deserve another chance, but if you give me one, I'll earn it. My parents gave Rachel and me matching bracelets, simple silver with small charms. Margaret explained haltingly that she'd had them made. Sisters, she said, because Rachel, we're sorry we didn't see you, didn't see what you've always been. Rachel cried. Margaret cried. I might have too. That afternoon, while Rachel and Margaret cleaned up wrapping paper, and James helped Michael fix something in my garage that wasn't actually broken, I slipped into my office. Opened my desk drawer, looked at the will one more time. Everything was in order, clear, final, fair. I closed the drawer and went back to my family, messy, imperfect, but trying. And for now, that was enough. Later that week, after everyone had left and the house felt too big again, Rachel moved in. Not temporarily, not as a guest. She brought boxes, furniture, the small pieces of her life in Seattle that mattered. I helped her unpack, arrange her room, make space. This feels permanent, she said, hanging pictures on the guest room wall. Good. Kat, I need to pay rent or something. I can't just... You can, and you will. She looked at me with that mixture of gratitude and uncertainty I'd seen so often. I don't know how to repay you for everything you've done. I took her hands, made her look at me. You already did. You showed up. That's worth more than any amount of money. She hugged me then, tight enough that I felt her heart beating against mine. That night, with Rachel asleep in her room, not the guest room anymore, just her room, I sat in my kitchen with tea and silence. The house didn't feel empty. For the first time in 11 years of ownership, it felt full, not with things, with purpose, with love, with the certainty that whatever happened next, I had made the right choice. Fair doesn't mean equal. Fair means earned. Rachel earned this. Every square foot, every memory, every future moment that would happen within these walls. And when the time came for her to know, I hoped she'd accept it with the same quiet grace she'd shown me when I needed it most. January brought rain to Southern California, unusual, heavy storms that flooded streets and knocked out power. Rachel and I spent 3 days trapped inside, playing cards by candlelight, telling stories we'd somehow never shared before despite 39 years of being sisters. She told me about a boyfriend I'd never known about, one who'd broken her heart when she was 19, about jobs she'd applied for and never got, about the small disappointments that had shaped her life while I was off being successful and strong and everything she wasn't expected to be. "I'm not brave like you," she said during one of those long conversations. "I never did anything important." I watched her in the candlelight, this woman who'd driven through the night when I needed her, who'd given me everything without hesitation, who made a home out of whatever space she occupied. "You're the bravest person I know," I told her. "Bravery isn't doing big things everyone sees. It's doing small things no one notices because they're right." She cried. I held her. And I knew, more certainly than any diagnosis or document or decision, that she deserved everything I'd given her. February arrived with unexpected sunshine. Dr. Chen ran new tests, checked new numbers, reviewed new scans. The amyloidosis had stabilized beyond her projections. Not gone. Never gone. But controlled. Manageable. "You're buying time," she said. "Use it well." I intended to. Michael visited in mid-February, bringing Lily for a long weekend. They stayed in the living room on an air mattress, laughing late into the night about nothing important. Lily helped Rachel bake cookies. Michael and I walked on the beach, talking about things we'd never discussed before: his divorce, his fears about being a good father, his jealousy of my life that had never been as perfect as he'd imagined. "I was wrong about you," he said, waves crashing beside us. "I thought you had everything figured out. I didn't realize you were just as scared as the rest of us." "Everyone's scared, Michael. Some of us just hide it better." He nodded. "Lily likes it here, likes being around you and Rachel. She said your house feels safe." That was the highest compliment I could imagine. In March, I updated the will one final time. Not the major structure, that stayed the same, but I increased Michael's portion from 8% to 15%, increased my parents from 2% to 10%, kept Rachel at 75%. Will Sanders raised an eyebrow when I explained. "They've changed? They're trying, and I want to reward actual effort, not promises, action." "That's fair," he said. "Real fairness, boss, not just equal division." Exactly. April brought my 40th birthday. Rachel organized a small party, just family, just us. Margaret baked a cake. James grilled steaks. Michael brought flowers. Lily made a playlist of songs she thought I'd like. We ate on the back porch as the sun set, the lemon tree now heavy with fruit Rachel had been carefully tending. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, without the weight of unsaid things pressing down. Before cake, Lily handed me a card she'd made. Inside, she'd written in careful cursive, "You're the strongest woman I know, but you're also allowed to be weak. I'll always be here." I couldn't speak for a full minute. That night, after everyone left and Rachel cleaned up the kitchen despite my protests, I sat on the porch alone. 40 years old, sick but stable, alone but not lonely. I'd tested my family and found the truth. Some had failed, but they were learning. One had passed completely, and she was inside right now, humming while she washed dishes. I'd rewritten my will to reflect reality instead of obligation. I'd chosen presence over promises. I'd chosen earned love over assumed love. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt at peace. The next morning, I found Rachel in the kitchen making breakfast. The sunlight caught her hair, turned ordinary brown to gold. She smiled when she saw me. "Coffee's ready." I poured a cup, sat at the table, watched her move through my kitchen, our kitchen, with the ease of someone who belonged. She didn't know yet. Didn't know about the will, the house, the future I'd secured for her. Didn't know that if I died tomorrow, she'd inherit everything I'd built. But someday she would know, and when that day came, I hoped she'd understand. This wasn't a gift. This was recognition. This was fairness. This was love proved through action instead of words. Fair doesn't mean equal. Fair means earned. And Rachel had earned every bit of it. I didn't die. Not then. That's the part people always want to know first. The treatment slowed things down enough to buy me time. Months at first, then more. The doctors never promised me anything, and I didn't ask them to. I had already learned that certainty is a luxury, not a guarantee. What surprised me wasn't that my body held on. It was how much lighter I felt once the truth was out in the open. The will was signed, the house was accounted for. The decisions were made without anger, without theatrics, without regrets. Once that was done, something inside me loosened its grip. I had spent my life believing responsibility meant carrying everything quietly, paying early, planning ahead, never asking for help unless it was unavoidable. That approach had served me well in uniform. It had not served me well in my family. Rachel moved in permanently in February, not as a guest, not temporarily. She gave notice on her Seattle apartment, packed her life into boxes, and filled the spare bedroom with pieces of herself I'd never seen before. Photo albums from high school, a collection of vintage teacups, books she'd read so many times the spines had cracked and healed. One morning, I found her rearranging the living room. She'd moved my reading chair to catch better light, added plants to the windowsill, hung curtains that softened the harsh California sun. She froze when she saw me watching. Is this okay? I can put everything back. It's perfect, make it yours. She smiled, uncertain. Ours. Fine, ours. The house transformed in ways I hadn't anticipated. The kitchen smelled like her cooking instead of takeout containers. Laughter echoed through the rooms that had been too quiet for too long. She found a job at an insurance company in San Diego. Better pay, shorter commute, coworkers who actually noticed her. At dinner, she'd tell stories about her day with an animation I'd never seen when she lived in Seattle. She was blooming. March brought my parents back for a week. They'd called ahead this time, asking permission instead of assuming. We're not here to fix anything, Margaret said carefully when they arrived. We just want to be here. They kept their word. James helped Rachel plant tomatoes in the backyard. Margaret taught us both her pie crust recipe, the one she'd made 100 times while I watched but never learned. We took walks on the beach at sunset, conversations flowing easier than they ever had. One evening, after Rachel had gone to bed, I sat with my parents on the porch. The lemon tree had grown heavy with fruit, branches sagging under the weight. Margaret reached over and took my hand. We failed you, she said quietly. We raised you to be independent, but what we really did was make you feel like needing us was weakness. James cleared his throat. When you were little, you fell off your bike, scraped your knee badly. You didn't cry, just stood up and said, you were fine. I was so proud. He stared at his hands. I should have taught you it was okay to cry. You didn't know. That's not an excuse. Parents should know, or at least ask. We sat in silence while the neighborhood settled into evening sounds, distant traffic, someone's wind chimes, the ocean breathing a mile away. We're proud of you, James said finally. Not because you're strong or successful, because you're good. You chose kindness when you could have chosen cruelty. I had to look away before they saw my eyes fill. April brought my 40th birthday. Rachel organized a small gathering, just family, a few Navy friends, neighbors I'd finally gotten to know. Michael drove down with Lily. My parents came bearing Margaret's famous apple pie. We ate on the back porch as the sun set, conversation flowing without the weight of unsaid things pressing down. Lily gave me a card she'd made. Inside, careful cursive, you're the strongest woman I know, but you're also allowed to be weak. I'll always be here. I couldn't speak for a full minute. That night, after everyone left, Rachel and I sat in the kitchen with the debris of celebration around us. Crumpled wrapping paper, half-eaten cake, a bouquet wilting gently in the sink. She was washing dishes, humming something off-key. Rachel, I said. She turned, hands soapy. I need to tell you something about the will. Her face went careful. Okay. You're getting the house, the investments, almost everything. She set down the plate she'd been washing. Kat, not today, not tomorrow, but when the time comes, because fair doesn't mean equal, fair means earned. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't know what to say. Say you'll take care of it, make it a home, fill it with love like you've filled it these past months. I promise. We stood in the kitchen, water running forgotten. and I felt something settle that had been restless since the diagnosis. Not relief, completion. 1 year later, May arrived with marine layer mornings that burned off by noon. I'd been living with the diagnosis for 18 months, and my body had surprised everyone, including Dr. Chen, by stabilizing better than any projections. The amyloidosis hadn't disappeared, but it had slowed to barely measurable progression. "You're buying time," Dr. Chen told me at my annual review. "Maybe a lot of it. I can't promise you'll see 80, but 60? That's not unreasonable." I drove home in a daze. Rachel was at work. She'd been promoted to senior analyst, a raise that finally let her breathe without checking her bank account every week. The house was empty when I walked in. I stood in the living room, looking at the life we'd built together, her books on the shelves, her throw blanket on the couch, her coffee mug in the sink because she always forgot to put it in the dishwasher. When she got home that evening, I told her everything. She cried, but they were good tears. We ordered pizza and watched terrible movies and laughed until my sides hurt. Michael called that weekend. "Kat, I need to tell you something. I've been seeing a therapist about the jealousy, about how I treated you." His voice came through tight with something that sounded like shame and hope mixed together. "She helped me see I was angry at you for being strong because it meant I could be weak. I let you carry everything because I knew you would. That's not love. That's using someone." I sat down on the porch steps, phone pressed to my ear. "Michael, I'm not calling to ask for forgiveness. I'm calling to say I see it now, and I'm doing better. Not just with you, with Lily. She deserves a dad who doesn't need her to be small so he can feel big." That took courage. "No, courage is what you did. I'm just trying to catch up." June brought changes I hadn't expected. Rachel met someone, John, a senior claims adjuster at her company, 42, divorced, kind eyes, and an easy laugh. She was nervous telling me, like she needed permission to be happy. "Rachel, this is your home. Live your life." Over the next months, I watched her fall in love with a confidence I'd never seen before. John came to dinner. He shook my hand with respect, not nervous energy. He looked at Rachel like she was the most interesting person in the room, which she was. After he left, Rachel practically floated into the kitchen. "Well, I like him. He sees you the way you deserve to be seen." She hugged me tight. "Thank you for giving me space to have this. You don't need my permission, but you have my blessing." Summer passed in a blur of ordinary happiness, barbecues and beach days and long evenings on the porch. My health remained stable. Work continued at limited capacity. The family that had broken under truth rebuilt under honesty. Not perfect, but real. In August, Michael brought Lily down for a week. They stayed in sleeping bags in the living room, laughing late into the night. Lily helped Rachel cook. Michael and I walked on the beach, talking about things we'd never discussed. His divorce, his fears, his jealousy that had poisoned our relationship for decades. "I was wrong about you," he said as waves crashed beside us. "I thought you had everything figured out. I didn't realize you were just as scared as the rest of us." "Everyone's scared, Michael. Some of us just hide it better." "Lily likes it here. She said your house feels safe." That was the highest compliment I could imagine. 2 years after diagnosis, August brought news that changed everything again. Dr. Chen ran comprehensive tests, reviewed scans with the careful attention of someone expecting one result and finding another. When she called me into her office, her expression was guarded, but her eyes were bright. "Kat, your numbers are better than I've seen in any case like yours. The protein deposits have actually decreased. You're in what we call extended remission." "What does that mean?" "It means you could have years, decades even. The amyloidosis isn't gone, but it's dormant." I called Rachel from the parking lot, told her through tears I hadn't known I was holding. "We're celebrating," she declared. "Big dinner. Everyone." That night, our table overflowed. My parents had driven down. Michael and Lily came. John was there, fitting into our chaos like he'd always belonged. Friends, neighbors, members, chosen family mixing with blood family until the lines blurred. James stood to make a toast. 2 years ago, we almost lost you, but we didn't, and in not losing you, we found what we'd been missing: honesty, real connection. Thank you for being brave enough to demand better from us." Margaret added, "And thank you for giving us the chance to be better." Michael lifted his glass to Kat. "Who taught us that love isn't what you say, it's what you do?" We drank to that. September brought another shift. Rachel and John got engaged. Small proposal on the beach, just the two of them, but her joy was enormous. She showed me the ring with shaking hands. Is this okay, moving forward with my life? Rachel, this is everything I wanted for you. But what about the house? Should I tell him about the will? You don't have to tell him anything. This is your home regardless. Your future is your own. She cried happy tears. How did I get so lucky? It's not luck. You earned this, every bit of it. They planned the wedding for next spring. Small ceremony, close friends and family here in the backyard under the lemon tree. I said yes before they finished asking. October meant wedding planning consumed the house. Fabric swatches, flower samples, menu tastings. I watched Rachel transform from the overlooked sister to a woman claiming her own happiness with both hands. John pulled me aside one evening. I want you to know I understand how special Rachel is, what she did for you. I'm not going to take her away from this, from you. Even if you did, it would be her choice. Still, this house, your relationship, I respect it. Then you're already family? The months that followed blurred together in the best way, not because nothing happened, but because everything that happened felt right. Thanksgiving with the whole family, Christmas where everyone gathered without drama, New Year's where we toasted to health and happiness and second chances. In March, I updated the will one final time, not the major structure. Rachel still got 75%, but I increased Michael's portion from 8 to 15%, increased my parents from 2 to 10%. Will Sanders raised an eyebrow when I explained. They've changed? They're trying, and I want to reward actual effort, not promises, actions. That's fair, real fairness. Exactly. April arrived with Rachel's wedding a month away. The backyard had been transformed. New landscaping, string lights hung from the lemon tree, a small arch being built where they'd exchange vows. I watched Rachel and Margaret work together on decorations, heads bent close, laughing at something I couldn't hear. This was what healing looked like. Not forgetting, not even forgiving completely, just choosing to move forward together. The night before the wedding, Rachel found me on the porch. Can't sleep, too much to think about. She sat beside me, the night air soft and salt-scented from the ocean. Kat, I need to tell you something. When I drove down that first night, when you called about the $5,000, I was terrified. Not of the drive, of losing you. I took her hand. But what I found here wasn't just you needing me. It was both of us needing each other. You taught me I was enough exactly as I am, that I didn't have to be invisible to be loved. You were never invisible to me. I know that now. She squeezed my hand. Tomorrow I'm getting married, starting a new chapter. But this house, this life we built, it's my foundation. You're my foundation. I felt tears spill over. You're mine too. We sat in comfortable silence, the lemon tree rustling in the breeze, the house behind us full of sleeping family who'd learned to love better. The wedding day arrived with perfect California sunshine, 75 degrees, cloudless sky, a light breeze that kept everything from feeling too hot. 30 people gathered in the backyard, family, close friends, people who'd witnessed the journey from brokenness to healing. Rachel wore a simple cream dress, flowers in her hair. John wore a gray suit, eyes bright with joy. When they exchanged vows under the lemon tree, the tree I'd planted years ago, when this house was just shelter, not home, I felt something complete in my chest. Rachel's vows included a line that broke me. I promise to show up, to stay, to love you not because I have to, but because I choose to, every single day. John's eyes filled. I promise to see you, to make space for you, to never let you feel invisible again. When they kissed, the small crowd erupted in cheers. Michael whistled. Lily threw flower petals. My parents held hands, something I hadn't seen them do in years. At the reception, tables set up in the backyard, food catered by Rachel's favorite restaurant, music playing from speakers John had rigged up, I found myself watching instead of participating, not from sadness, from contentment. Michael found me by the lemon tree. You're smiling. I am. It suits you. He gestured at the celebration. You did this, you know, all of it. I didn't plan a wedding, no, but you created the space for it, for all of this. He waved at the gathered family, the laughter, the joy. 2 years ago, we were broken. Now look at us. People can change if they choose to. We chose to. because you gave us no choice but to be honest. Lily appeared, dragging both of us toward the dance floor. Come on, it's a slow song family dance. We joined the circle, Rachel and John in the center, the rest of us surrounding them. My parents swayed together. Michael spun Lily until she giggled. I stood between them all. This family that had failed me and learned, that had broken and healed, that had chosen growth over comfort. As the sun set and the string lights came on, turning the backyard into something magical, Rachel pulled me aside. She handed me an envelope. Don't open it now. Later, when you're alone. What is it? Just thank you for everything. After the last guests left and the caterers cleaned up and John and Rachel drove off to their honeymoon weekend in Santa Barbara, I retreated to my bedroom. Opened the envelope with tired hands. Inside was a letter in Rachel's careful handwriting. I don't have the words to express what you've given me. Not the house, though I know that's coming and I promise to honor it. Not the money or the security, though those matter. You gave me permission to be seen, to take up space, to believe I was enough. When we were kids, I watched you be everything I wasn't, brave, strong, successful. I thought I'd failed by being small, but you showed me that showing up is its own kind of bravery, that love without conditions is its own kind of strength. This house will always be ours, even when you're gone, not for decades, I hope, but someday it will be ours because you built it with love, and I'll maintain it with the same. Thank you for testing us. Thank you for demanding better. Thank you for choosing me. Love always, Rachel. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in my desk drawer next to the will. Both documents of love. Both proof that fairness isn't about equal division, it's about recognizing what matters. I walked through the quiet house one more time. Tomorrow, Rachel and John would return. The house would fill with noise again. But tonight, I had silence to reflect on how far we'd come. 2 years ago, I'd been dying and alone, testing my family to find out who would stay. I had discovered that blood doesn't guarantee presence, that strength isn't the same as not needing anyone, that love has to be proved through action, not assumed through relation. I'd given Rachel the house because she'd earned it. I'd given my parents and Michael smaller portions because they'd learned, even if late. I'd made choices based on truth instead of obligation. And in doing so, I'd found something I hadn't known I was looking for. Peace. Not the peace of having everything figured out. The peace of knowing I'd been honest. That I'd demanded better and people had risen to meet it. That I'd tested what I thought I knew and discovered what was real. I sat on the porch one last time that night, looking at the lemon tree heavy with fruit, the yard still scattered with flower petals from the wedding, the lights strung overhead waiting for the next celebration. This house had been my anchor through deployments and diagnoses, through loneliness and fear. Now it was more than shelter. It was home, not because of the walls or the mortgage I'd paid off or the appreciation in property value, because of the people who filled it, the sister who'd shown up without question, the family who'd learned to love better, the future that stretched ahead with possibility instead of dread. I thought about the spreadsheet I'd made that first night, the columns, the scores, the clinical documentation of who'd passed and who'd failed. It had seemed so important then, proof of my hypothesis that most people loved conditionally. But I'd been wrong about something. The test hadn't just revealed who my family was. It had revealed who I was, someone who'd been so afraid of being weak that I'd never let anyone close enough to help, someone who'd confused independence with strength. Rachel had taught me that needing people isn't weakness, asking for help isn't failure. Being vulnerable is the bravest thing you can do. And in return, I'd given her everything, not because she'd asked, but because she never had to. That's what love looks like. Not words, not promises, not obligations. Just showing up, just staying, just being there when everything else falls away and only truth remains. I closed my eyes and listened to the night, the ocean breathing in the distance, wind chimes from a neighbor's yard, the house settling around me with the weight of memory and hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. My health would require monitoring. Rachel and John would navigate marriage. Michael would continue working on being better. My parents would keep learning how to show love instead of just feeling it. But tonight, I had this, the certainty that I'd made the right choice. That fair doesn't mean equal, it means earned. That love isn't what you say, it's what you do. And sitting here in this house that would someday be Rachel's completely, I knew I'd lived the most important part of my life, the part where I stopped measuring worth by strength and started measuring it by presence, where I stopped assuming family and started choosing it, where I stopped being alone and started being known. Rachel had shown me that truth by driving through the night, sleeping on my couch, giving me everything without asking for anything back. And I'd honored that truth by giving her a home, not just a house, a home. The difference matters.